Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat and welcome to the 2023 Post-SONA discussions. After a successful State of the Nation address by President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., let us continue to dive deeper into his message as we tackle specific issues in our cluster panel discussions. Ngayong umaga ay tatalakayin natin ang poverty reduction. Kasama sa usaping yan ang edukasyon, kalusugan, trabaho, pagpapababa ng presyo ng bilihin, mga ayuda at marami pang ibang bagay na umaalalay sa ating kababayan. With us this morning is Secretary Teodoro Herbosa of the Department of Health. USEC Michael Wesley POA, Department of Education. Secretary Rex Gatchalian, Department of Social Welfare and Development. Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma, Department of Labor and Employment. Undersecretary Maria Anthonette Velasco-Allones, Department of Migrant Workers. Deputy Director General Rosanna Urdaneta, Technical Education and Skills Development Authority, or TESDA. Chairperson Prospero de Vera III, Commission on Higher Education. USEC Marlo Iringan, Department of Interior and Local Government. And Secretary Arsenio Balisacan, National Economic Development Authority. Okay, let's begin. We'll begin with the Department of Health. The President stated in his SONA, quote, "We are working towards a more direct and efficient delivery of services through integrated primary care providers and networks in partnership with the LGUs and private sector." End quote. Secretary Herbosa, please tell us more about the projects of the Department of Health that bring healthcare services closer to the people. What are the government's programs to improve healthcare access, such as facilities and mental health services, especially in remote areas? What is the status of the President's health commitment to build specialty centers in all regions?
Thank you very much, Daphne, and good afternoon to everyone. For the aspect on access to healthcare, the President has already verbalized that to me on the day he actually appointed me and asked me to make sure that access to healthcare of our poor, disenfranchised, the underprivileged happens. So I put on an 8-point agenda for the department, and the first point of that agenda is that bawat Pilipino ramdam ang kalusugan. And with this idea, we actually embody what has been emboldened in the Universal Healthcare Act. In the UHC Act passed in 2019, we were able to implement a huge framework change for the health system. And the idea here is that the strength of the implementation of the universal healthcare is really access to primary healthcare. So very important that people in remote areas end up being attached to a specific physician or a specific health center, so they will have access, ready access to a doctor. And health services, medicines, and laboratory tests. So this is the main focus of government, and this can be done in partnership with the local government units, local chief executives that actually run the primary care services. So that's very important. And together with this, actually, there's a very big project of the First Lady called the Lab for All project, which tries to do all of these things in the most remote areas and the people with depressed economies, wherein we bring hospital personnel outside the hospital and bring them to the community to provide services to the people. So this is the type of difference, Daphne, that we want to implement. Services that are brought to the people instead of the people going to our healthcare services. So that's going to be done through strengthening the primary healthcare system all over the country. And we need the help of the local chief executives that actually run what we call the local health systems. So that's the big plan. It's a big partnership. Luckily, the private sector is also gung-ho about helping out in the health sector. And as you very well know, I think in the SONA, sinabi din ng Presidente, ang mamamayan, ang army, and we need to keep them healthy to be able to have development in our country.
Secretary Ted, what about the status of the specialty centers? How far have we gone?
Yeah, as reported by the President, we have incorporated specialty centers in many of the retained hospitals of the Department of Health. The huge ones, we have counted about 60 that have been completed. Heart operations, cancer operations are now being done in several regions of the Philippines, whereas before it was all done here at the Heart Center. So we've completed many of those in the first year of the President, and we continue to have multi-specialty centers planned by the President. The first one is the site he visited in Clark. So this is going to be the first multi-specialty center site that is going to be built through the help of private sector donation, PAGCOR money, and DOH money. And hopefully by the 1 or 2 years, we'll be seeing the first general hospital built in Clark, followed by a children's hospital, followed by the heart center, and then the cancer center. And this will be multiplied to 17 other regions. And in fact, yesterday, when we accompanied the President, he had the final instruction outside the SONA to me that PCSO also wanted to fund the cancer centers. So I had commitment from the PCSO now to actually fund 3 cancer centers every year for the next several years. So that's going to be an addition to the already planned, and we are going to do the completed staff work for that so that can be accomplished.
That's wonderful. Let's move on to education. Undersecretary Poa. In the SONA, the President said, taking to heart the lessons of the pandemic, alternative delivery modes and blended learning methodologies have been adopted to ensure unhampered learning. Additional social safety nets, such as school-based feeding programs, are also being implemented. Learners will be made more resilient. Our public schools and facilities are being increased and fortified. Please tell us more about the Department of Education's active and dynamic approach in advancing education for, as the President introduced, ang bagong Pilipinas.
Thank you very much, Ma'am Daphne. Magandang hapon po, unang-una sa lahat ng mga nandito, sa lahat ng nanonood sa atin. Basically, tayo po, no, under the Marcos administration, we all understand na napakadami ng challenges ng basic education and we need to address them sooner rather than later. So under the Marcos administration and of course under the stewardship of our Vice President, Sara Duterte, we will be tackling these issues using a two-track approach. Ano pong ibig sabihin ng two-track approach? No? We do have the traditional solutions. Alam naman natin, meron tayong mga shortages in terms of classrooms, shortages in terms of teachers. So we will continue hiring more teachers, building more classrooms. Of course, with DPWH as a partner, we will be building disaster-resilient classrooms. But aside from that, kaya nga sila perennial problems kasi ang hirap mag-catch up. So that's why there is a second track that we are looking to explore. In fact, we are starting now, and that is tapping into technology. As the President mentioned, there were lessons learned during the pandemic. Dati, hindi naman natin alam na pwede pala yung blended learning, pwede pala yung online learning, pwede pala yung distance learning. So now, we need to use those lessons learned from the pandemic to address the issues of basic education. We started this year because number one, dati po, pag ganitong may bagyo, wala na kaagad pasok. Pag may lindol or kahit po mga man-made, no, na disasters, wala na tayong pasok. Pero sa ngayon, to maximize learning continuity, since we are on learning recovery mode, hindi na po tayo nagsususpindi ng pasok. Ang sinususpindi lang natin ay yung in-person classes. Pero tuloy-tuloy po yung pag-aaral ng ating mga learners sa kanilang mga bahay using what we call alternative delivery modes. Whether it be modules, blended learning o online learning, yan po ay nagagawa na natin sa ngayon. Aside from that, we want to tap into technology to really help with congestion in our schools. We believe that by institutionalizing blended learning, ito yung mas effective way to quickly decongest our schools, hindi lang yung shifting schedules tayo. So, right now, the department is really moving towards that direction, providing connectivity to all of our schools. We want our learners to be equipped with 21st century skills. No? Binibigyan natin sila ng mga e-learning carts or computers Para nang sa ganun, ay because that really is, no, in a globalized society, importante itong 21st century skills sa kanila. Nang sa ganun, we have learners that after basic education will not only be ready in terms of employment in the Philippine setting, but ready for the world, really. So yun po yung direction natin sa Department of Education.
That's great. We'll get back to you shortly also. Let's move on to Social Welfare and Development, Secretary Rex. The President mentioned the food stamp program that has been launched recently. Please tell us more about this program. Also, how does the government ensure that beneficiaries of social welfare and development programs are the deserving poor and the disadvantaged, given that there are some misconceptions of people that beneficiaries are those whom the local leaders know of?
Thank you, Daphne. Yes, that's true. The President did mention the food stamp program. The food stamp program is envisioned to fulfill a promise of the President to make, to end involuntary hunger, and at the same time, to make the country more inclusive. Right now, the Philippine Statistics Authority has rated around 1 million Filipino families as food poor. That means there are families who don't make beyond 8,000 pesos. So dahil hindi sila kumikita ng 8,000 pesos, they can't provide for their family, or they can't buy the basic food requirements for their family. So in this program, we will give these families electronic benefit cards, wherein we'll load them up with food credits rather than cash. And we will accredit retailers, kadiwa ng Pangulos, community markets, agri-co-ops, so that the beneficiaries can go into these retailers, accredited retailers, and use their electronic benefit cards that have been loaded with food credits. Now, the food credits are designed by the FNRI of the DOST, the Food and Nutrition Research Institute, that prescribes 50% of those credits goes to carbohydrates, 30% to protein, and 20% to healthy fats. So meaning pwede sila pumili from that food group. It gives them back the power of choice. It empowers our food poor Filipino families to decide for their own what their families need. So that's the first dimension of it, ending hunger, involuntary hunger. But the President also expanded the notion that, or the concept that we have to include pregnant and lactating women, because we know that stunting, wasting, these are very big issues in our country, and for the past 20 or 30 years, we've been trying to combat stunting in particular, pero it's still prevalent. With the food stamp program, the President wants to include pregnant and lactating women so that we can watch over their caloric intake or their food or nutrition-specific interventions for the first 1,000 days, so that by the time children get to the daycare centers, they won't be stunted. So the program, again, the program's goal is to, 1, end involuntary hunger, 2, to combat stunting, and 3, to change the behaviors of our Filipino families, to make sure that they understand that pwede naman ang pagkain mura, masustansya, and masarap. We want to do a behavioral change so that they start consuming right, they start eating right. Now, on the second question, it's always been a misconception that the selection of beneficiaries goes through the political leaders. Quite the contrary. All our programs, including 4Ps and now the food stamp program, ang anchor niyan is the listahanan database that the department runs. The listahanan database is a database based on saturation drive or a survey drive that's done by the department. The local leaders have no control over that. And then we use the listahanan as a basis for our different intervention programs, such as 4Ps, or in this case, the food stamp program. In the food stamp program, for instance, because we are looking for the families that don't make beyond 8,000 pesos, we will choose the 1 million families with the lowest per capita income. So it's data-driven, it's database-driven, and it's really isolated or insulated from our political leaders on the ground. So I guess that's a misconception that has to be clarified again and again, so that we put the right beneficiaries into the right programs.
Thank you, Secretary Rex. Now we move on to Labor and Employment, Secretary Laguesma. The President reported in his SONA, quote, "As of May this year, our employment rate rose to 95.7%, clear proof of the improvement from the severe unemployment that we experienced during the height of the pandemic. Employment then was a low of 82.4%. But even with our current high rate of employment, we must do more. We will generate additional jobs for the remaining 4.3% of our workforce, as well as for the 11.7% underemployed Filipinos seeking better employment opportunities, end quote. As the President said, there is more to do. Secretary Laguesma, please tell us more about the DOLE's programs and initiatives in advancing employment and creating opportunities for the workforce.
Maraming salamat, Daphne. Isang maganda at mapagpalang hapon po sa ating lahat. Una, nais kong banggitin na yung nabanggit na employment improvements or employment gains ay bunga o resulta po ng kolaborasyon, active partnership, at involvement po, una ng atin pong tinatawag na social partners, ang mga manggagawa, ang kanilang kinatawan, at ang mga namumuhunan. Ikalawa po, nakatulong po yung active partnership at convergence ng iba-ibang mga departamento, kagaya po ng aming ikangay pinagsimulan ng DOTR, to mention also DNR, DSWD, kasama po namin. Kasama po namin din ang Department of Health. At siyempre po kasama namin ang local government units. Dito po ay nagkaroon ng sama-samang pagkilos at hindi po ito aakuin lamang ng Department of Labor and Employment na amin pong accomplishment o wins as far as the Department of Labor and Employment. Napakahalaga po ng tulong, kolaborasyon, convergence of different departments upang makamit po natin yung ganyang klaseng employment rate. At siyempre po, hindi ko dapat makakalimutan na nabanggit ng ating Pangulo, mapalad po tayo na meron tayong tinatawag, and to quote the President, an enormous pool of highly competent, dedicated, and I will add, dependable workers po. Kasama po nating naglilingkuran. Kasama po natin sila ngayon, siguro po. Marapat na palakpakan po natin ang ating sarili sapagkat bahagi po tayo ng improvement nito pong employment gains. No? At kasama po namin yan ang atin pong TESDA na doon po sa mga detalye, bahala na pong magpaliwanag si Deputy Director General Urdaneta. Nais ko lang pong magpasalamat sapagkat ang ating Pangulo po, sa simula po ng paglilingkuran, ibinalik po ang TESDA sa Department of Labor and Employment. Isang mahalagang hakbang sapagkat nariyan po yung linkage ng training sa employment. Hindi po pwedeng maghiwalay. Kaya pinasasalamatan ko po ang ating mga reunited na kasamahan sa TESDA na dati po ay pinangungunahan ng TESDA Director General na si Attorney Danilo Cruz noong pong nakarang taon. At ito po ituloy-tuloy sapagkat nakikita po natin na dapat po nating i-sustain at bahagi po dito and align with the 8-point socio-economic agenda of the President and the Philippine Development Plan for 2023-2028. Nagbalangkas din po ang Department of Labor and Employment sa tulong ng social partners, labor representatives at employers representative ng isa pong tinatawag na Labor and Employment Plan. Dito po nakapaloob yung mga programa na kung saan tutukuyin o bibigyan po ng pagsusulong may kinalaman po sa youth employability, yung pong tinatawag natin na pagpapatuloy po ng kapayapaang pang-industriya, at yung po sinasabi po natin na building an inclusive and sustainable social protection sa lahat po ng mga sektor, kababaihan, kakatandaan, kagaya ko, elderly, yung pong active force, nasa active force, at siyempre po ang kabataan. So, ito pong mga programa na to ay nakapaloob dun sa tinatawag natin na Labor and Employment Plan na na-endorso po nung pong tripartite sector. At ito po ay aming ibabahagi sa ating kabinete nang sa ganun po magkaroon ng konsiderasyon at magkatulong-tulong, magkaroon po ng convergence upang matamo po natin yung sinasabi natin ng ating Pangulo na inclusive growth, poverty reduction to a single digit, at ang pinakamahalaga po sa Department of Labor and Employment ay yung pagkakaroon ng dekalidad, remunerative, sustainable na employment opportunities.
Thank you, Secretary Laguesma. You mentioned inclusive growth and the importance of the labor force and TESDA's role in it, so let me jump to TESDA. The Deputy Director General Urdaneta. The President said, we will not let a student's financial constraints be a hindrance to education. We have activated social safety nets such as skills development training and youth employment programs. This is what he said at his SONA. So sa bahagi po ng TESDA, what key trainings and programs are in store for the Filipino learner? How are these accessible to our kababayans?
Thank you, Daphne. Let me tell you, it's not just about accessibility, but inclusivity also. We are very much engaged with our partners, particularly the local government units. When the President appointed our new Secretary, Secretary Suharto Mangundadatu, dalawa lang po ang pinagbilin sa kanya: harmonize the TVL track with DepEd, and number two, try to reach out to as many Filipinos and let them be skilled, reskilled, and upskilled. So these are the things that we're doing right now. When it comes to accessibility, we have also made it a point that the scholarship has been allocated to all the private TVIs as well as the TESDA institutions, so as we are able to reach 300,000 graduates or trainees or enrollees. With that, we are also trying to populate our TESDA online program. We have 150 programs already, which are also being used by our OFWs when they have their rest time, so that they would be able to have these particular programs also, and they will be certified later and assessed. Meron din po kaming tinatawag na ngayon na micro-credentialing. Ito po yung mga bite-size or micro-programs na usually ang industry po ang nagpa-participate na mag-register ng program sa amin. These are the 5 to 10-day programs such that for a Filipino to be reskilled or upskilled, ito po yung mga kinukuha nila mga programa. So at this point, we have already a number of micro-credential programs that have been registered to TESDA. There are so many things that we wanted to do at this point. Primarily, we wanted to really engage the industry in the business of training and development. Katulad po ng sinabi kanina ng DOLE Secretary, kami po ay nakikipag-ugnayan sa lahat ng mga industry partners. We are activating our industry boards such that we wanted them to really do the curriculum themselves, because ito yung mga kailangan nila. So para ho talagang maging responsive ang mga programs ng TESDA, we sit down with them, we develop our training regulations with them, and we also provide them with the opportunity na sila din po ang mag-implement ng mga programs because they know better than us. So these are the things that we're doing. And then apart from this, we would like also to make sure in terms of accessibility, meron ho kaming guiding principle ngayon under our new secretary, Secretary Mangundadatu, is saying that sa TESDA, lingap ay maaasahan. So we have this TESDA sa barangay program. We will reach all the barangays, the 42,000 barangays, for us to be able to train them and skill them. Kasi po naniniwala kami na pag trinain mo ang isang tao, 5 tao pa matutulungan mo. For a person to be trained, to be employed, you will be able to at least help the 5 members of the family in a household. So these are the things that we wanted to do in TESDA, and these are the things that we wanted to really implement for us to respond to the directives of the President.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to migrant workers. Undersecretary Allones, I will read the President's SONA. We are engaging with our partners in the international community to ensure a safe working environment for our countrymen. As we do so, we are also putting in place responsive mechanisms for the social welfare, repatriation, and reintegration of our returning OFWs into the Philippine economy. Yusek, ano po ba ang mga proyekto ng DMW sa ilalim ng Administrasyong Marcos Jr. upang lalong maprotektahan ang ating mga overseas Filipino workers? Ano-ano rin po ang mga nag-aabang na programa para sa mga nagbabalik na OFWs?
Maraming salamat, Madam Daphne. Bago ko sagutin, nais ko kayong bigyan ng konteksto ng departamento dahil kami yata yung pinakabata sa magkakapatid dito sa stage. Ang Department of Migrant Workers po ay fully constituted lang noong Enero ngayong taon. Kami ay bago pero luma dahil pinagsama-sama ang 5 ahensya ng pamahalaan kasama na ang Social Welfare Office ng DSWD, ang NRCO, National Reintegration Program na dati ay nasa pamamahala ng OWA. Kasama rin po ang International Labor Affairs Bureau ng Department of Labor and Employment, ang National Maritime Polytechnic, at yung pinakabuod po, pinakamalaking bahagi ng DMW ay ang dating POEA. Having said that, ang vision po ng DMW ay maging tahanan ng OFW sa gobyerno. At yan po sa vision na yan, nakabatay din yung buod ng pinakamaraming reintegration programs na inilatag ng department. At alinsunod din po yan, suporta namin sa ating Ambisyon 2040, panatag, matatag at maginhawa ang pamumuhay kung sa umpisa pa lang buo ang pamilya. At ang trabaho po yung trabaho po ng reintegrasyon ay nag-uumpisa bago pa umalis ang OFW. So ang mga programa pong nakalatag, sumusuporta sa ating adhikain, yung aspirasyon na sinasabi natin, na ang pangingibang bayan para magtrabaho ay choice at hindi dala ng pangangailangan. Kaya fully supportive kami kay Secretary Benny sa DOLE na ma-achieve ang full employment dahil ang ibig sabihin po nun ay maraming pagkakataon ng ating mga kababayan na hindi namang ibang bansa at dito pumili na magtrabaho. Yung mga programa po sa reintegration, para madaling tandaan, merong 3 focus, so siguro ay ating KKK, Ma'am Daphne. Yung unang K, kabuhayan. So kasama po rito yung mga livelihood development assistance, ang pagbibigay po ng mga pa-training, pa-seminar, at nakika-partner din po kami sa Department of Trade and Industry para mabuksan ang kanilang mga kaisipan at maihanda rin sila sa pagbalik dito na may mga nais silang gawing negosyo, handa sila in terms of capital and in terms of kakayahan, yung capacity para gawin yon. Kasama rin po yung pangalawang K ay ang kasanayan, kaalaman at kahusayan. So ang partner po namin dito ay TESDA dahil marami po sa ating mga OFWs kailangang ma-reskill, kailangang ma-upskill para matugunan ang demand ng ating labor market dito at makapili sila at maging handa sa pagbabalik na pwede na sila dito sa mga ganitong patungkol na ibang specific na mga jobs na naghihintay sa kanila rito. Alam nyo, mabanggit ko lang, ang private sector po at social partners ay napaka-supportive sa mga programang ito. Isang success story po ay yung partnership sa mga review centers natin. Marami tayong nurses, teachers, iba pang mga professionals abroad na hindi passers ng board. So, SecTed, inumpisahan namin this year. Nagkanda kami ng mga online review. Alam nyo, yung mga OFW sa Middle East, sila yung nag-top ng mga nursing exams ng PRC. So nagpapasalamat din po kami sa PRC dahil yung mga special programs for licensure exams, ito po ay pinagpupunyagian naming magawa. Nag-online review kami sa mga OFWs at nakaka-impress po na sa kanilang break time, yun po ay ginagawa nating available ang mga online review para po tuloy-tuloy SecTed. Kung magdesisyon silang umuwi, sila ay pasado na sa board. Kasama rin po dito ang programang tinatawag na SPIMS. Sa Pinas, ikaw ang ma'am, sir. Marami tayong teachers na non-passers sa LET. So tinutulungan din po sila para ang DepEd naman, partner namin, may alokasyon sila taon-taon ng mga positions sa DepEd na teaching positions na talagang nakalaan sa OFW. Ngayong taon po ay 1,200 ang mga allocated na position. So yung mga bumabalik pong teachers, yan po ay tinutulungan ng DMW kasama ang DepEd para talaga pong maging teacher sila at ma-practice nila yung kanilang profession. Ang pangatlong K ay kalusugan. Hindi yung lahat ng kwento ay maganda. May mga umuuwi na disturbed, distressed, depressed dahil alam natin gaano kahirap mawalay sa pamilya. Nagpapasalamat kami sa DOH, ang ating pong mental health programs, 10 ng ating social partners. Marami pong mga volunteer psychologists, mga psychosocial associations and services Sila po yung partner namin para buo pa rin po na ihahanda talaga na ma-reintegrate sa ating pamayanan ang mga bumabalik na OFW. Sakali man po meron silang problema sa kaisipan, sa pisikal na kalusugan, meron po tayong OFW hospital na tuloy-tuloy naman po ang suporta ng ating Kongreso. Thank you, Ma'am Daphne.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary Allones. Ang daming magagandang programa. At let's move on to CHED now, again in education, higher education. Applauded and well received, the President assured us that tertiary education in state universities and colleges will remain free for all qualified students. Testament that tertiary education remains a priority of the PBBM administration. Post-pandemic, how is the CHED advancing the government's agenda in education? What other programs await the Filipino tertiary learner?
Thank you, Daphne. The mandate of the Commission on Higher Education under the Marcos administration is to ensure access and equity to quality higher education. So the first is access. As the President said, we assure everyone that free public higher education will continue so that the close to 2 million students studying in more than 200 public universities will continue not to pay tuition and miscellaneous fees. And we have increased the participation rate in higher education to 41% already. That means 41% of university-age students are in university. We want to maintain that and even increase that by creating pathways for those who have fallen out of university education to come back. Equity. We have seen the phenomenon of what we call first-generation graduates. Ito po yung mga estudyante na una sa pamilya nilang nakatungtong sa kolehiyo at nakapagtapos. And that is the reason why we want to focus on equity, to push public universities in particular to consciously increase the number of students coming from public schools, poverty-stricken areas, the children of indigenous communities, because we have to bring and target more of them to our universities. Now, quality education, that's the third component. We want to ensure that all our public and private universities maintain quality education standards by ensuring that their curriculum is okay, their teachers are qualified, their programs are implemented correctly, and therefore, by ensuring quality education, we want to make our teachers get their advanced education through scholarships so they can finish their master's and PhD. We want to make sure that the facilities of schools are adequate. We want to make sure that we increase the research output of our faculty members. And the net result of this is when we have this, we have universities that internationalize. The President made mention and recognized 52 public and private universities that are now included in international ranking. These are universities that consciously benchmark with the other universities abroad, improve their quality of education, and create partnerships with other universities. By doing all of this, the net result is we will continue to produce world-class professionals. We have complied with the requirements of EMSA and the EU so that our seafarers continue to be recognized internationally. All 400,000 of them in ships all over the world. Together with Marina, we will make sure that the quality of maritime education continues to be world-class. Together with the DOH, we're addressing the nursing problem so that we will continue to produce world-class nurses who will serve in the Philippines or practice their profession all over the world. We want to continue producing world-class doctors, particularly those that will serve in underserved communities in the Philippines by expanding medical education in public universities. We now have 18 state universities and colleges with medical programs 6 of them approved under this administration, so that the scholars there, when they graduate and become doctors, serve in underserved areas. And the last one is, we have identified niche programs where we can produce world-class professionals, especially in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, in aircraft maintenance, and we have seen opportunities in animation and game development. So we are consciously linking Philippine universities with foreign universities so that their graduates will have both Philippine and international credentials, so we continue to be world-class. That's the overall strategy in higher education, and the President has recognized this: maritime education, nursing education, world-class universities, and of course, free higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson De Vera. Let's move on to DILG. This is, of course, a key department in the local implementation of national government programs. Sa usaping poverty reduction, paano tumutulong ang DILG sa labang ito at paano ninyo ito paiigtingin? What is the general directive of the President to the department when it comes to poverty? Undersecretary Iringan.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Of course, taking our cue from the President and under the leadership of Secretary Benjamin C. Abalos Jr., the DILG continues to provide support to our local government units so that they will be in a better position to provide for the needs of the marginalized and vulnerable sectors in their areas of responsibility. Please take note that the department, we do not have projects that directly impact on poverty reduction. We work through local government units by way of the policies and the technical assistance and the capacity development intervention that we provide. Take, for example, the infrastructure sector. Our department help facilitate the completion of development projects, and we also monitor the proper implementation of all these development projects, funded from the Local Government Support Fund, which is provided in the General Appropriations Act yearly. The LGSF covers the Growth Equity Fund, the financial assistance to local government units, conditional matching grant for provinces, for provincial roads. We also have the Support to Barangay Development Program for those barangays which have been previously affected by the communist terrorist groups. So all in all, the ILG provides technical assistance on project development and management, particularly on planning, designing, procurement, implementation, and maintenance of all these development projects. These projects would include farm-to-market roads, school buildings, health centers, electrification, livelihood projects, and more importantly, water supply and sanitation system. So if you look at it, for example, the roads that are built by local government units would make it easier for the people in the community in the far-flung areas to bring their produce to the market at lower costs. Therefore, it would also contribute to the lower prices of basic commodities. It will make it easier for students to go to school, and more importantly, they will be more inspired to study. I do believe that the solution to poverty is for our children to be properly educated. It will be easier for the people in the community to bring their sick to the hospitals and clinics. So those are the impacts that the infrastructure sector, which we are helping out with, brings to our respective communities. So overall, we also help our local government units in the implementation of the community-based management system. This is a total enumeration of all the households in the communities, profiling their conditions and situations so that our local government units will have a better evidence. It will have an evidence-based planning so that the limited resources that they have will be geared towards the most important programs and projects of the local government unit. Aside from that, of course, the effort of our Philippine National Police in the maintenance of peace and order, our effort in making sure that our local government units adhere faithfully to the provisions of the Anti-Red Tape Act and the Ease of Doing Business Act would contribute to producing or creating a community or a locality where that will be conducive for businesses and industries to thrive and flourish. more businesses, more industries would mean more employment opportunities, more livelihood for our people. So those are some of the things that our department is doing in order to contribute to poverty reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to weave in all these departments under poverty reduction under the Marcos administration, let's talk to NEDA, Secretary Balisacan. Based on recent economic developments, do you think that we're on track towards attaining the targets laid down in the Philippine Development Plan, especially on poverty reduction? What are the necessary changes needed to ensure the country will achieve 9% poverty rate by 2028?
Thank you, Daphne. Good morning to everyone. First, what's the socioeconomic development agenda? Primarily, it's all about creating jobs, not just more jobs, but better quality jobs, so that we could achieve reduce poverty to single-digit level. That is at 9% from 18.7% in 2021, the latest data available. Okay, so the question is, are we on track? I think given the recent developments, economic data that we have seen, we are definitely on track. As you have heard already many times by now, the economy is growing, grew at 7.6% last year. In the first quarter of this year, it grew at 6.4%. That's the one among the highest growth rates we can see among emerging economies in the world, and the envy of our region. Now, if you look at the jobs data, we also are reaching unemployment data have continued to decline. The numbers have reached 4.3% by May of this year. That 4.3% is very low, actually. That's the kind of unemployment data you see in most developed countries. Now, and that's where the challenges come in, because it's not so much about, the number of jobs one thing, but the quality of those jobs is another thing. And that's where most of my colleagues here are so much engrossed into. It's improving the quality of jobs available, improving the employability of our workers, enhancing the human capital of our people, so that they can, so that the labor market can work effectively, efficiently. Our workers are able to match the kind of jobs that are needed by emerging sectors like the internet, the AI, and the green economy, and so on. So that's the primary reason why we are so much into going around the world, talking to the business community, to all investors, to get investment coming to the country. Because without investment, there is no way you can improve that quality of jobs. You need to get those, to build factories, you need to build plants, equipment, roads, bridges, and so on, to be able to employ more people in areas where you can, our people can earn decent incomes. So that's the challenge, Daphne, and we are in a hurry, because as we keep on saying, many of our neighbors have left us long ago. But now we have the opportunity. As we keep saying, the stars are aligned. And if we miss this time, I don't know where we are going. But I am definitely sure that given this alignment, there's the governance that we have right now, the popularity of our president, the clarity of our development blueprint and the kind of this collaboration that we have between government and the private sector and the academe. I think that when we get all our acts together and we are calling whole of government, whole of society approach, there is no reason that we can fail this time.
Wow, the stars are aligned. I like what you said. And we could see that in all the agencies. We've been talking since yesterday with all the different department agencies here. And we can really see the multi-agency approach, the whole of government, whole of society approach. And like you mentioned, we have to catch up. And in fact, right now, the president is in Malaysia doing exactly what all of you have been mentioning here. Okay, so let's bring it back now again to the Department of Health. The president said in his SONA, we are now refocusing our health priorities, applying the lessons learned from the pandemic and addressing the weaknesses that it has exposed. Secretary Herbosa, I know you're very, very involved in pandemic issues a few years ago. Could you please expound on the statement of the president? What important pillars of the healthcare system are we strengthening and prioritizing?
Yes, Daphne, we did learn a lot from the pandemic. It exposed the gaps in our healthcare infrastructure and our healthcare system. And we learned to cope, but we need to actually strengthen the health system. And this is the reason I put forth in the agenda for the reform in the Department of Health and the whole health system, our 8-point priority agenda. We talked about Bawat Pilipino Ramdamang Kulusugan, which is really primary healthcare and universal healthcare. But we also want to talk about being able to use technology. We also want to talk about making sure that we are addressing any crisis. The Philippines is so disaster prone. We just have typhoon hit areas just now, and these people are flooded, and we need to be able to respond very fast in terms of health needs for these areas that are affected. We also need to actually talk about disease prevention through pag-iwas sa sakit. At this point, the Department of Health now has like the third highest budget among the different agencies. Yet, if we focus it all on curative measures, we might be wasting some of this money. We need to talk about health literacy, the people being able to know how to keep themselves healthy, which we learned during the pandemic, how to prevent illness, how to eat well, exercise, etc. So pag-iwas sa sakit is a very important part. When we talk about use of technology, not only do we use digital health, but I want an agency that would be more efficient in the way it is managed. We're talking about things like asset management systems in the Department of Health, because as we get more budget, we have more work, and we have to absorb the money and spend it more efficiently. So these are the things we're looking at to improve the healthcare system and strengthen it. The other thing that's very important, and I notice people love it, is the focus on mental health. I put number 6 in my priority on mental health and wellness. And the youth of today need our help. It's all about being able to make accessible. Doesn't mean we will have more psychiatrists or more psychologists. What it means by focusing on ginhawa sa pag-isip at damdamin is to be able to have other measures like sports, hobbies, other recreational activities, entertainment, and social networks that actually support different age levels or age groups. Whether you're a senior citizen, an adolescent, or in early life, you will have all this technical support, and I'm sure the other cabinet secretaries will support me in that. What's very important also in the pillars is the focus that the president mentioned on our healthcare workers. I think it's very important that now we understand that a good health system is really dependent on how good we take care of our healthcare workers. He even mentioned that we hope that one day our healthcare workers will not leave the country and serve the Filipinos themselves. And they're the best nurses in the world, the best doctors. And if they actually stay and we take care of them, we will be able to provide a better health system for everyone. And he promised also that the health emergency allowances should be given, and it's in the budget. We're just ironing out the efficiency and how to deliver them to each and every healthcare worker that served in a COVID ward during the past 3 years. And lastly, of course, what we've learned is what to do in the next pandemic. we've actually learned how to prepare ourselves from the shock. What happened, we were not ready during this pandemic. It caused a great economic shock. My seatmate here is nodding. And our measures were overcome by fear. We were actually, because we were unprepared. So I think the most important thing next is really preparing ourselves, the whole society. And the best thing we learned, Daphne, was with solidarity, we're able to get out of government. The whole of society and whole of nation approach really worked. We got 74 million people vaccinated. The president signed just before the SONA on the weekend the lifting of the public health emergency. And that created a new normal for all of us. And I do hope that we can focus on economics, education, social services for the next generation. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you, Secretary Herbosa. Okay, let's move to education again. The Matatag Agenda for Basic Education has been launched recently. Please tell us more about this program and how is it beneficial to the welfare of both learners and teachers?
Thank you, Ma'am Daphne. The Matatag Agenda is actually the roadmap of the Department of Education for the next 5 years. No? So, iba siya, hindi siya yung framework lang. Yung Matatag Agenda, these are concrete steps, these are commitments. In fact, around 45 commitments that the department wishes to deliver in its vision of really improving the quality of basic education in the country. So itong Matatag Agenda po na to, it's actually a mnemonic. No? The first Ma is making the curriculum responsive and relevant. Then the Ta is taking steps to accelerate basic education facilities. The second Ta would be taking good care of our learners. And the G is giving support to our teachers. So as you can see, apat na facets to ng education that we believe have to go hand in hand to improve the quality of education in the country. That's curriculum, that's basic education facilities, that's taking care, of course, of our learners, and of course, most importantly, our teachers. So dito sa curriculum, we have started. In fact, we are about to launch the recalibrated K-10 curriculum in a few weeks' time, probably around mid-August. So K-10, nagkakaroon we need to clarify this. Nagkakaroon kasi ng mga haka-haka na wala na yung K-12. Actually, nandyan pa yung K-12. Nauna lang po ma-review yung K-10 at yun yung una nating natapos. But the review of the senior high school curriculum, mainly grades 11 and 12, is underway. We already have a national task force doing that. We hope to complete that within a year's time. So yan po yung ating curriculum. And of course, we are on learning recovery. So we needed to decongest our curriculum, focus more on the foundational or fundamental learning areas like math, science, reading. In fact, sa reading program, meron din tayong i-roll out ng mga national reading program at meron din tayong ginagawang proyekto ngayon with SecRex of DSWD sa reading. Now, with the second, the basic education facilities, nabanggit ko nga kanina, and nabanggit rin ni SecTed that we have to exercise fiscal responsibility. So of course, in an ideal world, we need to catch up to the shortage in terms of classrooms, but we don't have an infinite amount of budget to do that. So in exercising fiscal responsibility, we need to spread out our resources. Kaya nga we are also tapping into technology. We will also be launching yung National Education Portal, although that's a working title. No? It's going to be an offline, online portal that will be available to teachers, learners, and parents where they can already access learning resources. Pagdating naman po sa larangan ng ating mga learners, SecTed also mentioned the importance of mental health. And that is why we already established a Learners' Rights and Protection Office, which will look into the mental health issues of our learners and also abuses in our schools. In fact, we already launched our telesafe hotline para meron na pong direct line yung ating learners and parents para makapag-complain or makapagbigay sa atin ng mga insidente and to give us awareness kung ano talaga yung nangyayari sa ating mga learners sa field. No? Further, what's important with learners is also nutrition. Parati kasing nakakalimutan yan. Pero napakahirap mag-aral pag wala ka sa tamang nutrisyon sa katawan. And that's why we have the school-based feeding program. We are looking Kasi sa ngayon, nasa 120 days for this school year ang ating school-based feeding program. We are looking to expand this to try and see if we could have it for the entire school year. And that's very important, no? Because it hits two birds with one stone, ika nga. Because aside from giving proper nutrition to our learners, it also encourages our learners to stay in school. So nababawasan din po yung dropout rates. Kasi pag gutom ka, bakit ka papasok? Diba? Wala ka ring matututunan. So that's a very important program for us. But lastly, of course, for our teachers, two things. No? It's really quality and welfare. Pagdating sa quality, we have training programs now. We are working also with the different universities to provide training programs and professional development programs for our teachers. Pagdating naman sa welfare, of course, ang isang napaka-importante is yung benepisyo ng ating mga teachers. So sa atin, we have in fact issued guidelines on the special hazard allowance. Binaba natin yung index, no, noong mga schools kung saan nako-consider sila as part of being in hazardous locations. That means that merong additional 25% doon sa sweldo ng mga teachers na nagtuturo sa mga schools na to. By lowering the index, we also increase the number of schools and teachers that will be recipients of these, of what we call the special hazard allowance. And then, isa pang malaking reklamo ng ating mga teachers is yung napakaraming admin tasks ng ating mga teachers. That's why in a few weeks' time, we will be issuing yung ating interim guidelines on reducing kaagaran yung admin task ng ating mga teachers. Ibibigay na natin siya sa mga non-teaching personnel. That's why we are also very aggressive in hiring non-teaching personnel in the DepEd. And lastly, syempre po, no, kinakausap din natin yung DOH sa ngayon pagdating sa mga health programs na pwede nating ilatag for free sa ating mga teachers. And we are also talking to GSIS for their benefits, as well as the IBP, or the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, so that we can provide the proper legal aid sa ating mga teachers, particularly on yung mga loan obligations po nila. So basically, the Matatag agenda is our comprehensive approach towards resolving and addressing the problems of basic education. But as we've all said here, we are all interrelated, and it's not DepEd alone who can accomplish all these things. It has to be a whole nation approach. That's why our call to action is Bansang Makabata, Batang Makabansa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow. Matatag agenda for basic education. Very nice. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to DMW, again, migrant workers, Undersecretary Allones. The DMW app has been recently launched. What are the services and benefits of this new app? And what are the safeguards put in place to ensure that information and data are protected?
Thank you again, Daphne. At the outset, this effort we embarked on in response to the call of the President in last year's SONA. And in last Monday, he reiterated it, that if I may paraphrase him, he said that digitalization is our imperative today, not tomorrow or in the next few days, but it's really today. And that's why 6 days ago, what we launched actually is the OFW Pass. This is equivalent to the Overseas Employment Certificate, which used to be a paper form. So this is the digitalized version. And this allows the outgoing overseas Filipino worker to be able to not anymore line up physically, but just go online and fill in the requirements, and he or she gets a digital version on the mobile phone for that. I said this is just part and parcel of the soon-to-be more comprehensive DMW app. Sabi ni Secretary Toots Ople, kung ang gusali namin sa Ortigas ay tahanan ng OFW, yung DMW app ay online tahanan ng mga OFWs. And when we embark on the enhancement of the app and the completion of the more comprehensive app for DMW, that seeks to provide additional services like yung mga gateway to online payments, pati yung pagpapadala ng pera sa mga pamilya rito. Kasama na rin yung mga magulang na OFW nag-tutor sa mga anak. Buti nga mayroon ng ganyan ngayon eh. Nung panahon talagang wala, nung umpisa ng overseas employment. So ngayon, SecTed, kahit nandun sila sa abroad, nag-tutor. So meron din tayong i-upload ng mga materials doon in partnership with many other agencies. So that's the strategic direction of the app. For now, it's the OFW Pass. And I mentioned, Ms. Daphne, that Day 6 ngayon ng pilot testing. It's being rolled out in 10 countries, which has the most number of OFWs around the world, and of course here in the Philippines. Our team is gathering and consolidating all the feedback in terms of user friendliness. On the second question of security, we are thankful to the Department of ICT, and we have pala an organization called the Philippine Cyber Security Response Team, CERT. So they have supported us in ensuring that the hardware, software, and including our people are prepared to protect data, because we want to make sure that the features and the use of the app will be compliant with our data privacy law, and that safeguards are equally in place to assure our users that their information will not be compromised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maraming salamat sa ating mga panelists. Malawak ang usapin ng kahirapan at ang buong puwersang pagtutulungan ng ating mga ahensya sa Poverty Reduction Cluster ang susi sa pagpapatupad ng mga direktiba ni Pangulong Ferdinand Marcos Jr. para sa bagong Pilipinas. Okay, join us again later. We will be back at 2 p.m. as we will be discussing environmental protection and disaster management. This is going to be a hybrid discussion because many of our cabinet secretaries and agency heads are actually at the DND in Aguinaldo, Camp Aguinaldo, currently dealing with the disaster preparedness and response for the ongoing storm. This has been Daphne Osanya Paez, and thank you for joining us this afternoon in the 2023 Post-SONA discussions.